Welcome to the Sample Chapter Podcast, the show where authors read a sample chapter from one of their books. Here's your host, Jason A. Meiske.
Hello, Sample Chapter listeners. Welcome back to another exciting episode of the Sample Chapter Podcast. This is episode 239, and this week we are going to be sitting down with Greg Hallmark. He is joining us to discuss his debut novel, Jump, the Robert March Chronicles. And what a fantastic book and story that he has to tell us. We're going to be discussing the hero's journey, the amazing creative process, and when it comes to creativity, Greg is really a very creatively driven guy. He has a lot of irons in the fire, so to speak, likes to do lots of different things, as you're going to find out, because one of the special things about his reading that you're going to hear next week, but you get some information about this today, is that his book is read to you by AI. And you're going to hear all about that in this episode, what went into it and how he did it. And it's going to be really cool. So stay tuned for that here in just a moment. There's just so much good stuff. So I want to make sure that you click that link in the show notes for our podcast friends, the Pop Goes the Culture crew over there. The network has about a half a dozen other shows, and also the affiliate of the show, Writer's Block Coffee. And they've got 3 delicious flavors that you're going to love. So click those links in the show notes to find out more about those. And of course, if you want to reach out to the show, you can do so via email at samplechapterpodcast@gmail.com. You can follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and reach out to me there. But meanwhile, we've got a great episode for you. And without further ado, let's hop on over to that interview with Greg Hallmark. Hello, Sample Chapter listeners. Hey, welcome back. This week I have a very unique guest that I cannot wait to get to know. I am speaking with Greg Hallmark. He is a web developer, college instructor, and a writer based in Nashville, Tennessee. He is a U.S. Army veteran, having served in the 11th Armored Cavalry Regiment during the Cold War era. And he's here today to discuss his first book, Jump, the Robert March Chronicles. So, ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome to the show, Greg Hallmark. Hey, Greg, how you doing, man?
I'm good, thank you.
Yeah, I'm so happy to have you here. Your email caught me at just the right moment, and of course, whenever somebody emails me and says it's my first book, I I have a weak spot for that. So I instantly was like, oh, I got to pull this up, and then you sent me the links to check out the audio and everything. So this is really great.
Well, I appreciate you having me on your show, Jason. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. So you've got a couple of careers in your background before you became a writer. Give us a little bit of your history leading up to where you are today as a writer.
Yeah. Well, as you mentioned in your intro, I was in the Army for a while. Got out, went to college on the GI Bill, the old one. While I was in college, I got into the kind of the communications business, to put it very generically. I worked for a commercial photographer for a while, and then worked at a local TV station in Shreveport, where I'm from, and did a little bit of everything in that field. Moved to Nashville, had a couple of various jobs, mostly in sales, but I was an early adapter of the internet, and the last place that I worked for an employer, I was a salesperson, but also I was kind of the guy that did other, like everything else is what there's all, it seems like in every organization, there's somebody who is kind of like in charge of, uh, you know, the company newsletter,
Mm.
or arranging the entertainment at the company Christmas party every year,
Hmm.
that kind of thing. I was that guy. And I got wind of this new thing called the World Wide Web. Back in like 94,
Hmm.
93, 94. And um, I wasn't a computer guy, but I was intrigued by the whole idea. And long story short, I ended up doing a website for that business, and it was like literally the first website in that industry in Nashville. Actually, I think in the whole state of Tennessee,
Oh,
and it got
wow.
a lot of sort of like media attention.
Hmm.
And the guy that owned that place owned like a whole string of those businesses, and he's like, "Do one for all of them," and I did. And uh, kind of long story short, a year later, I quit my day job, and I started a small web development firm, and I've been doing that forever. Um, and a couple of years ago, I started teaching web development at a local art college here in Nashville called Nosy College of Art and Design, and
Hmm.
I really love it. So that's kind of my weird little career path, but here we sit.
Yeah, that's cool though. You refreshed my memory there for a moment of I remember the morning for whatever reason I was up early enough. I was in my 20s back in the 90s. I remember waking up early one day and watching Good Morning America, and they were discussing that new thing, the World Wide Web,
Yeah,
and how they think it's going to change the world and what it can do. And I just remember sitting there eating some cereal and going, "Wow, that sounds incredible."
yeah,
And a couple of years before that, when I was serving, I remember a friend of mine, he bought a computer, and he was showing me like how to connect to the phone, and then we could communicate with people elsewhere. And I was like, "Well, who is this guy?" And he goes, "I don't know. We're in
yeah.
this we're in this thing called a chat room." I'm like,
Right, right. I remember that. It's like, what? This is insane. I mean,
yeah, it was like, so like
like, how much
what
is my phone bill going to be?
oh
Like,
my gosh,
you
yes.
know what I mean? I mean,
Yes.
it's like this person could be in like Hong Kong, and,
Yeah. Yeah. Oh
and
my gosh. And then
it's free.
the days of dial up, and then
Yeah.
God forbid your local server was down, and so you got one out of town, and then yeah, you talk about a phone bill. Oh my gosh. Oh man. So at what point along that line then, I guess you started working with the development and whatever. What made you get into to the writing?
Well, I've always written,
Yeah.
kind of sporadically, throughout my whole life. Ever since I was little, I was always making up stories, uh, and uh, just kind of off and on. And uh, I'd never written a book before. I'd written a couple of screenplays. One of them that actually got optioned. It was never made. I didn't make any money off of it.
Hmm.
But so I was kind of familiar with that. Plus, um, I was kind of a filmmaker as well. I've had some short films that I've worked on, either directed or edited, in film festivals. Uh, that kind of. So I was always, and I worked in TV for a long time, so I was a technical director. So I was always kind of in the technical end of communications, and plus I was just generally kind of, you know, creative, you know, um, especially writing.
Hmm.
Um, but I'd never written a book, and so I you know, I wrote one like on purpose. Uh, I had an idea that came to me. It was actually 2019.
Mm.
And it came so clear. I mean, I remember actually where I was. I was in the car on a certain street. My wife was driving. Um, and this idea just came into my head kind of out of nowhere.
Mhm.
And I think creative people frequently experience that. You know, you read about,
Yeah.
especially songwriters, you know,
Yeah,
they'll say, I
absolutely.
don't know where the song came from. It just came through me, but it came from somewhere else. And it's kind of like that. And this idea for the story was uh, so good. I mean, just such a solid kind of nugget that you could actually like take and run with. Whether or not I'd be able to or not, that's a different question. But the idea itself, I thought, yeah, this could be interesting. So I just sat down one day, and the first couple of chapters just fell out. I mean, literally just boom,
Well,
they are.
I love that.
Kind of like the songwriting thing, you know. I don't know. They just came to. Of
Hmm.
course, the next, 15 chapters were like painful, difficult.
Yeah.
You know, I knew where I knew where I was going, but just because you know where you're going, there doesn't mean there's not a mountain between you and there,
Oh yeah.
or a cliff. And so that's kind of how it happened, pretty much. Oh, and I have a friend here in Nashville, an old friend of mine, um, who is actually he's a book editor. He's actually a music journalist, which is a pretty good sort of line of work to be in Nashville.
Yeah, I'd say.
That's sort of like his, how he makes money. But he also edits books, and he's actually written a book. He wrote a book probably 3 years ago about Bob Dylan that did really well. And anyway, he edits other people's books as well. And I was talking to him about this idea I had, and he basically said, "You got to write it. I'll help you with it. I'll be your editor." And
Nice.
so he man, yeah, that was a huge help, benefit. I mean, having an editor is just the difference between night and day.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean having an editor or just anybody within that world. Like for
Mhm.
me it was discovering a writing group here locally. I just kind of kept spinning my wheels for years, rewriting my first couple of chapters over and over and over again.
Mhm.
And when I found out there was a local group, I was like, all right, I'm gonna go and I threw caution to the wind. I came prepared with the pages I'd written, and sure enough, they were like, yeah, let's read what you got.
Mhm.
And yeah, they were able to like help give me some direction and be like, all right, well, everything you've got here, I mean, it sounds great, but you're giving me exposition, you're giving us background information
Yeah,
that we don't really need.
right.
You need it so that you can write, but the rest of the story isn't starting until chapter 3. And I'm looking at it going,
Mhm.
man, they're right. They're right. And yeah, it was groundbreaking for me to hear some of that stuff and
Mhm.
start really moving forward with the story. And it's changed everything for me having that group. And I don't get to meet with them as much as I had before, but still I tune in every once in a while through Zoom, or every blue moon I get to go and actually sit in on a meeting. But yeah, it's great having that. And then you were talking about with the writing process, the creatively, yeah, creativity process is just amazing. The way it comes to you, whether it's in dreams or somebody says a phrase that
Mhm.
kind of sticks in our heads, and we're like, "That's a funny thing to say," and why would you say it like that? And the next thing you know, you get this story idea that's running 100 miles an hour in a different direction. It's crazy. Again, the things that I've written, I remember the moments where they came to my mind, where I was like, oh yeah, I'm writing about that. And it's amazing how that starts.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it sounds mystical, um, and I guess it is. It is mystical. Um, but I mean, you know, it kind of sounds like it could be BS. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Unless you've experienced it.
Mhm.
And I've experienced it not only with this book, but other things that I've created, where it just seems like, okay, well, this idea is just sitting there, and all of us apparently it was already out there, and somehow or other it used me as a channel to
Mm,
be like realized.
that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing when that happens. It's I've written a few songs as well, and I have a lot of. I'm not a musician per se, but I have a lot of friends who are musicians here in Nashville. It's kind of hard not to have friends that are musicians in this town. And I've been involved in some co-writing experiences with those friends, and um, and it's kind of like that. It's sort of magic in a way, but like real magic. I mean, it's some kind of supernatural. There's a supernatural element to it, and I don't want to get all you know, crazy about it or anything. But
Oh no, nothing crazy here on this show because I know my wife has learned over the years. Sometimes I'm writing in the living room, and she'll be watching something, or we're kind of half watching something like reruns or whatever. So that's when I'm like, yeah, I'm going to write instead of watching something I've seen 100 times. Yeah, okay, how many times can you watch a Friends episode?
yeah,
And I'll start giggling and laughing about something I'm writing, and my wife will look at me and like, oh yeah, sorry. She was like, yeah, your characters are talking to you again, aren't they? So, yeah, they are.
yeah.
It's like, yeah, no, this
It
guy, I
reminds
swear.
me. It reminds me of maybe a T-shirt or a meme or whatever that I've seen that goes, are the voices in my head bothering you?
Oh my gosh, that's
It's kind of
fantastic.
like, and when that's one thing that I really experienced when I was writing Jump on my book. Um, a world is created. Uh,
Hmm.
it's like it's a story world, and that's I think you know um, that's when you know you're really onto something. When the world that you're really creating um, becomes almost real.
Oh
The
yeah.
characters become real people with real characteristics and real personalities. Um, their actions become like real. Um,
Hmm.
and a whole sort of world um, opens up. And when you're in that, it could go anywhere. I mean, it's like a world. You could go, you know, you could go left rather than right, or straight ahead, whatever. I mean, there's a whole world to explore once you're in that mode, and once you've kind of cracked that egg, once you're in it, um, it starts to expand. Um, and and that's writing a book as opposed to a short story or a song or whatever um, has shown that to me. Because it's a book is expansive. I mean, it's a large sort of palette that you're working on. Um, there's no sort of limit to it. It
Yeah.
could be, it could be 100 pages long, or it could be 500 pages long. It could last 3 days, or it could last 3 centuries or 3 millennia. So that's one thing that I experienced in writing a book, as opposed to other writing things that I've been involved in, is just the scope of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a little bit, it's on the one hand, it's kind of daunting, like, holy crap,
Yeah,
where do I go? But on the other hand, it's also kind of liberating.
sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I
Anything,
mean, yeah, I mean, I've written, most of my stuff is like contemporary. It's, today's timeline, that kind of thing. Except for my most recent, where it's alternate history, 80s. And that's been, well, the hardest thing for me was to figure out what year I wanted to make everything stop, and like, okay, there's no more movies, no more music, anything else after this year. So that was a headache I did not know I was getting into.
that's interesting.
Yeah. And because I would want to make a comment on some movie and went, wait a minute, that came out late, like 80.
Yeah.
Is that going to work? Oh, that doesn't work. I can't use that. Like, okay. But like in your case here, I mean, you got this mystery thriller, it's military sci-fi, it's like near future, right? I mean, it's a whole nother world, future world. So
Yeah, it's 10 years from now.
okay.
And which, you know, there were similar issues to what you were describing with your alternate history. Wait a minute, that movie came out after the end of, after my time. But obviously different. It's like, okay, how do we, sort of project 10 years from now? Plus, to top it off, it's all about the multiverse. So not only are we 10 years ahead, but there's multiple versions of the world 10 years from now. So it got complicated, man. It really, really. I ended up having to create a database, literally a spreadsheet of dates, just to keep track of who was born where, when,
Oh yeah.
when this happened, when that happened, when, what was happening, on this date with our multiple characters. Yeah. Literally, I've got a database to keep all that sort of organized.
I wound up, I use Scrivener for my writing, and
Okay.
I've ended up having to go in and create the individual characters, how they relate to each other, the places, and a timeline. And that way, whichever book I'm working on, or 1, 2, 3, or going on forward from there, I can always go back, because that information can carry forward. I can bring it forward into the next book.
Yeah.
So it just kind of keeps growing with each
Yeah.
one. And
Interesting.
it's been hugely helpful, because I've had so many times where I went, oh wait, what was that guy's name in book 1? I forgot. And go back and
Right.
try and find that. And
So Scrivener does all that for you?
yeah, they've got quite a really cool database in there. You can keep track of your characters. There's even a cork board where you can kind of do like a murder board and how things interact with each other. It's really cool stuff. You can move it, and you can move chapters around, so you don't have to like search for, scroll like in Word or anything like that. You can just actually make up different chapters and then move them around, even on the corkboard. It's really great. It's really great. It's been very helpful, because
Somehow I managed not to know about that. I did it the old fashioned way, man. I just opened a Pages document and started writing.
Yeah, I think we all have to go through that. I think we have to go through that. I was aware of Scrivener about halfway through my first book, but I stuck it out. I was like, oh no, I'm doing it old fashioned. But then afterwards, when I wrote my next one, I was like, oh, let me try out this Scrivener thing everybody keeps talking about. And oh my goodness, it changed my life.
I will definitely check it out.
Yeah. So like, this world came to life. Everything was just coming at you. Like you said, you knew the world, you knew the character. we all have that mountain in the middle where it's kind of muddy. Did you know how you wanted it to end?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I knew how I wanted it to end. And so the way it went with me is in October or November, roughly 2019. I wrote the first 2 or 3 chapters, and by the end of that, my friend editor Daryl. By the way, his name is Daryl Sanders. Wrote a really good book. It's on Amazon. Check it out. But if you're a Bob Dylan fan or not, it's a good book. But anyway, by kind of the end of that little period, October, November 2019, he had got on board with me and had read the first couple of chapters and started to really encourage me. And shortly after that, COVID happened and the world shut down and everything got weird. 2020. And for some, I don't have an explanation, but you would think that would have been the year that I would really write the book, because, what else you gonna do?
Yeah.
I didn't write a word the whole 2020.
Okay.
It was, but I was thinking about it every day. I go on a walk every day. I walk kind of a mile. I got a little loop that I walk every morning. I would think, okay, what's going to happen next? What happens after that? So I was living with the idea for a whole year, and finally, 2021 January, I got back into it, and I knew where I was going from the very beginning. I knew what the final chapter was, and so 2021, I start writing again. I'm starting to make some progress. I get about, I don't know, another 5 or 6 chapters. And I hit another sort of block, I guess you would call it. I hate to use that term, writer's block, but maybe it was that. Maybe that's what it was. But I quit writing for a while. And I started to think, man, am I going to finish this thing or not? And my friend Daryl was just, spurring me on. I mean, come on, man, you need to write this thing. I'm like, I know, I don't know where, we had a lot of discussions about it. And finally, one day, I don't know, it was spring, like April 2021, roughly. He asked me that question. He said, do you know how it's going to end? And I said, oh, yeah, I know when it's going to end. He said, well, write that chapter. I'm like, yeah, I can do that. I know what that chapter is going to be. So I went ahead and wrote it. And that opened the floodgate. That cleared out whatever weirdness that was preventing me from continuing. And I knocked it out. I mean,
Nice.
I just finished it up in, probably 4 or 5 months. I was done. It was short. One of the problems with Jump is that it's not really long enough to be called a novel. It's a novella. Okay. Which is not really a viable commercial product traditionally. Okay. Of course, some of the greatest books ever written were novellas. Sure. If I was really smart, I'd be able to name a couple of them, which I can't at the moment. But trust me, some of the greatest. Anyway, so my friend Daryl, he's like, it's got to be longer, and I'm like, I don't think it doesn't want to be longer. But what came to me is actually it's the first of a series, right? Okay. It's the first of, I've got 5 books planned, counting this one, right? There's 5 books, all connected. It's a series. right?
Hmm.
Really, in the end, I mean, if I ever do actually write the other four, they could all be one, right? So Jump, which is book one of the Robert March Chronicles, um, would be almost like an introduction to the whole thing. I mean, it's kind of like an overview in a way, but it works by itself as well. I think so. Um, so long story short, writing the final chapter was what really helped me kind of get the ball rolling again.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, I love that. And because I do similar things. I don't always write chronologically. I'll jump ahead when I've got something in my mind. I'll jump ahead and write what I'm thinking of just for the idea, just for progress, so I
Yeah,
can keep going. And sometimes doing that, well, like you said, it opens the floodgates, and I realize, oh yeah, okay, I can go back to this other chapter now and fill
mhm.
in how we get here.
Yeah, yeah. That's exactly right. That's exactly how it works.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
So
a great technique.
so tell us about the Robert March Chronicles. What is Jump about?
Well, yeah. Um, as we talked about, it takes place in the near future, 10 years from now. The protagonist, Robert March, is a world famous tech guy. All right. Think of kind of a cross between Elon Musk and Steve Jobs, kind of
Okay.
that level. And he has a company in Silicon Valley. He has discovered uh, the methodology, the techniques, the science, the technology, or whatever that it will enable everyone on the planet to have free, useful solar energy. Okay,
All
and
right.
it's like huge paradigm shift. I mean, it's like big. It's a big deal.
Yeah.
And he's as the book opens, um, he's he's in the middle of uh, all of that just totally collapsing. Um, he's his company has unexpectedly and spectacularly failed. Okay, and so he he's lost. He's on the verge of losing everything. Um, Plus, he has a personal tragedy it's like the worst scenario for a man to be in. I mean, just he's publicly, humiliated. Um, the media has just gone crazy over all of this. You know how they love to pounce on failures, uh, spectacular failures, especially if they were famous, right?
Oh
And
yeah.
this guy was. So he's having you know, the worst period of a person's life that you can imagine. And then this personal tragedy happens. Um, and he's decided to end it all. He's decided to um, take his own life um, in a very sort of public and spectacular way. But right before that happens, he gets a phone call that that causes him to step back from the edge, and but it leads him into this incredible, um, complex conspiracy that he was unknowingly part of. He's a military veteran, army veteran, and but he's been out, for years, and he became this, superstar tech guy. He completely left that world behind, he thought. Um, but this phone call pulls him back into it. And it it turns out that he's part of an experiment, or was back during the time that he was in the army, and there's some really incredible, strange things that are happening that he gets sucked into. So that begins the adventure. Uh, it's just one thing after another.
Yeah, it's really spectacular, like you said. I mean, I've had the pleasure of checking out chapter one, and yeah, I mean, it all is kind of coming to a head, and then the rug gets pulled out, and then that hook at the end of the phone call and what that's about just it definitely hooked me, and it's yeah, I think everybody's going to really be interested in what's ahead for Robert March. It's really cool. I was really thrilled by it.
I'm glad you liked it. My goal was to write a page turner, right?
Oh yeah,
And I think I did that. Every chapter ends on a cliffhanger, and
love
um,
that.
it just sucks you right through it. It's like, gosh,
Mhm.
what now?
Yeah.
Um, and that was kind of a revelation to me when I was writing. Like I say, this is my first book, but it kind of dawned on me at some point that the goal of storytelling in general, um, not only book writing, but anything, any kind of communications, the goal is to convince the audience, the listener, the reader, whatever, to go one more page, one more chapter,
Hmm.
to hook them, right? To pull them through the story. And that's kind of, I played with that. It was almost like, how can I put it? I mean, it's not like I was setting out to write great literature, right? I mean, I've tried that before, and kind of, I'm not, I don't think I'm the person to do that. This is more like pop fiction,
Okay.
uh, more more like, and actually, it's more like a movie, right? Um, where uh, there are certain turning points in every film. As a matter of fact, I kind of came out of the filmmaking um, world, and I'd studied for years. I've studied screenplay structure, um, and aspects related to that, like the hero's journey.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you're probably familiar with that term.
Sure, sure.
I'm really sort of a student of all of that, and I really followed that structure. I followed a screenplay structure more than a book structure, which is why also I think why it's not really a long piece of work, because a movie script, a typical script should be about 120 pages, much shorter than a novel, obviously. And I patterned the story structure of Jump on a screenplay structure. I watched a lot of YouTube videos during the writing when I was really finishing it up.
Yeah.
A lot, but they were all on screenplay. Not, I watched a few on novel writing, but I didn't really get much out of that. But to me, the nuts and bolts, the the practical elements of how to write a good screenplay, um, I can kind of sink my teeth into that. It's not esoteric.
Hmm.
It's more, sort of practical. At roughly a third of the way into the story, a certain thing has to happen. At the halfway point, something big has to happen. The turning point. At the end of the middle 2/3, You have to turn into the final act. All of that kind of structural stuff. I love it. Uh,
Yeah.
and then applying Joseph Campbell's um, ideas as far as a hero's journey and the archetypal characters, all of that. I definitely use those tools, and it really helped. It really helped.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
it's a good framework, um, to kind of hang your story on. And I think, it's kind of a lot of people sort of dispute um, that whole hero's journey structure. They say, oh, it makes for formulaic movies or what have you. But I don't believe that. To me, it's like um, those elements in the hero's journey uh, are they have to be in a story. Even if you can't do it artificially, they have to occur organically. It's more like you're writing, you're in that zone, you're creating, and then after, when you come up for air, you can look back and say, oh yeah, that here is the herald archetype.
Mm.
Here's the call to action. Here's the refusal of the call. All of
Mm-hmm.
those, you can look back and say, oh yeah, I've got all of those things in my story. It's not like you forced them in it, but it's more like
Right.
check. And it also can help you if, okay, where do I go next?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's I always saw this story as a movie. I still do. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, I totally see it as a movie, and my editor Daryl, he agreed. He says it's like a movie, um, which made it so incredible back in February of this year when this ability to create these characters with AI voices
Mm. Mm-hmm.
emerged. It's like the universe just gave me, okay, you can't make a movie, you know, that's not going to happen. But look, here's a toy box with any number of characters. You can create. You can have them speak your words, and and plus I'm an editor anyway. Like I was a film video editor, so I know how to edit. You know, uh, which I edited the whole thing in GarageBand. But
Oh, neat.
yeah, man. I mean, that was like, holy crap. This is amazing. I mean, so I ended up making a movie out of it, but it's an audio movie.
Yeah, I was gonna mention. I mean, because it's like you said, it's got a very cinematic feel to it, and then with you doing something that is a first for the show, you've got this released. It's not just audio, but like you said, it's AI audio, and it's got a little bit of sound effects to it. It's got some uh, well, it's a complete cinematic feel. It really has everything that you need to pull you in, and it was really incredible. What was that process like, and why
Well,
did you decide to go with that?
yeah. Well, I'm a web developer. I have a development company, and I teach web development at a college. So I'm a kind of a technical guy in that regard. But I'm really a creative person. I came at all the technology from kind of a right brain approach as opposed to analytical. And, I've learned all this technology to be creative, and
Hmm.
so to begin with, I was of course just astonished at when Chat GPT first came out. I got wind of that. I mean, it only came out in November of last year. So I must have got wind of it somewhere in like early January, late December. And I started playing with it. I'm like, holy crap, this is a total paradigm shift. We've never had anything like this. I actually ended up incorporating teaching elements of it in my web development classes. Um, but then I got wind of this company called 11 Labs. Okay.
Okay.
11 Labs, a startup. I think they're in Sweden. I'm not sure, but I think they're in Sweden. Anyway, somehow I got wind of it. And I went to it and I tested it. And I'm like, wow, this is, I mean, this sounds like people. I mean, that doesn't sound artificial at all.
No, it sounded it sounded like somebody just reading the book like
Yeah,
normal.
I know. It's incredible. So I did a few, I did the first maybe half of a chapter uh, with the free version of 11 Labs, just as, goofing around really.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, and I thought, wow, this is pretty cool. But I didn't really think anything beyond that. But I was in class. I was teaching my Web 4 class one evening. I teach them at night, and I thought, and we were talking about AI in that class. We were experimenting with it, and I said, check this out, and I played those first few pages to the class, and they were like, wow, that's pretty amazing. And I'm like, yeah, I think that's pretty cool. And one particular student, a kid named Jake, by this time, all my classes, my students knew that I'd written a book, right?
Mm-hmm.
They knew about that. And Jake said, man, you could do your whole book on this with characters and everything. I'm like, you're right. So I kind of owe it to Jake. He's the one that really kind of planted, because I'd actually tried to do an audiobook. You mentioned that you listened to my Cool War
Mm-hmm.
podcast thing. So I'd kind of done that type of thing before with my own voice, and kind of in a storytelling podcast sort of format.
Mm-hmm.
But I started, I kind of goofed around with Jump doing that, and I'm like, nah, I'm not going to be able to do it. I mean, it's going to take forever, because it takes me, 10 different tries to get one sentence clear. But then what are you going to do when you have a female character? I'm not going to read. I'm not going to act like, and that's one thing about audio books. I don't like, that aspect of audiobooks when a male author is, reading a female character.
Yeah.
It doesn't work for me, And I'd like to do that. But this, I'm like, wow, they've got female voices. I could do the whole thing, So that's how it came about. And I started February 14th, as a matter of fact, my wife's birthday of this year. And I finished up 3 weekends ago. I did a chapter every weekend.
Okay.
It took it, to do it right. I mean, you can't just dump your content in there and hit a button and let it run. I mean, those characters, it's pretty amazing. Those characters, those voices in 11 Labs application, you got to work them, kind of,
Yeah.
because and so I would go a lot of times sentence by sentence. I'd have a character, speak a line. That's not quite right. I need a pause, right here. So I'd put a ellipses and a line break that would cause them to express the sentence differently.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's not automatic.
Yeah.
So, I tweaked and tweaked. It's kind of like, nah, do it again, kind of like I felt like what's his name? It's Stanley Kubrick with Shelley Duvall when they were making The Shining.
Yes,
He
yes.
drove her insane because I got to do it again.
Yep.
50th time is kind of. But get the cool thing, the robots never complain. They don't get tired. They'll do it again.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
So
That's
that was
awesome.
a pretty amazing experience. It really was.
Well, and you've got this released on, I mean, the book itself is on Amazon. It's available for Kindle Unlimited. But then you also have it coming out as these individual episodes, a chapter at a time
Yeah.
for free. I mean,
Oh yeah.
I went to your website and was able to listen to that first one, and that's awesome. What inspired you to put those out like that and not put them all together as an audiobook?
Well, hmm, actually, it ended up on Audible with all the other audiobooks.
Hmm.
That's kind of a interesting little quirk. If you've been through the process of getting your podcast on Spotify,
Hmm.
go through that process with Amazon. Amazon has a podcasting platform. Uh,
Yep.
you know, if you're on Amazon, it gets on Audible. So you're probably on Audible too. So technically it is an audiobook. Um,
Okay.
you know, but the my I guess in answer to your question, I wanted to like dole it out, on a weekly basis to try to build an audience.
Oh, yes.
And I, of course, how do you get people to consume your content? Is practically impossible.
Right, right.
Leave alone trying to, get money from people. But my thinking was, all right, let me do this I already knew how to do the podcasting thing. I knew how to, do all the technical part, all the creative part. I had a great story. Let me just kind of put it out there weekly, uh, and see what happens. Maybe somebody will hear it and uh, will go, you know what, that'd make a great movie. Uh, we need to,
Ah,
yeah,
smart.
that kind of thing.
I got you.
Yeah. In other words,
Okay.
maybe if I buy the lottery ticket, I'll actually win. Not like that. You know
Yeah,
what
yeah.
I mean?
You never know until you put it out there.
You don't know. I mean, what are you going to do if you're a creative person? What, are you not going to create?
Exactly.
You're going to
Yeah.
quit creating.
Yep. I
Unlike,
know. I keep staring at my screen, but the words are not popping on there by themselves for me.
yeah,
Crazy.
yeah. It's funny how that works.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, Greg, this has been amazing, man. There's just so much more I wish I had time to dive into, but for everybody listening that who I know is going to want to know more about you, where can they go to find out more about you and hear about these amazing books?
Well, I've got a website, greghallmark.com. It's got my stuff on it. The podcast version of the book has a website. It's called therobertmarch.com, where all the episodes are there. Of course, you can get it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, yada, yada, all of them. You can get the book on Amazon. Go to Amazon and search either Greg Hallmark, it's the only book I got on there, or the Robert March Chronicles. And I'd love to hear from you guys, anyone, as you know, being a writer, feedback is always welcome.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
I'm a feedback junkie. Please, tell me what you think. Tell me why it's good or why it's horrible. Either way, I don't know. Just tell me something. So feel free to reach out to me through any of those avenues. You can reach me.
All right. And of course, everybody, we're going to have the links for all that in the show notes. So that way you can click those links and go check out everything about Greg, the Robert March Chronicles, and we touched on it a little bit, but he also has another podcast. A little bit of it. It sounds like it's a little bit of your past in
Yeah.
the military, the Cool War podcast, which I've listened to a couple, and that's been really interesting as well. So everybody can go check out all of that just by clicking in the show notes. Greg, again, man, this has been fantastic. I've really enjoyed my time with you, and yeah, I think everybody's going to love this.
Well, thank you, Jason. I really appreciate it. Thank you for allowing me to be on your show, man. And good luck with your book.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. All right, everybody. Well, that is it today, but make sure you click that subscribe button so you don't miss out next week when we're back with Greg's reading, and it's the AI reading of his book, Jump, the Robert March Chronicles. That's next week. So until then, take care.